Hey everyone, I'm Diana Davison, an advocate for the falsely accused and wrongfully convicted. Now, I'm getting new calls for help every day as the outrage machine keeps churning, and there's one thing that is consistent across the board with every single case. The men whose lives are callously destroyed and tossed aside, well, they're just cogs in this machine, easily discarded. In fact, if you try to mention their names after the news cycle has moved on, everyone gets irritated. Because these men, they aren't human beings. They're characters created for the simple act of destruction. The men being described in what has aptly been called revenge porn, they're caricatures created by the accusers. The outrage when the man denies the accusation is born from insult, that someone dare criticize their work of art. The accuser wrote the story, created the characters, put a lot of time and effort into crafting the dialogue, although it's usually just a sentence or two that they claim the guy kept saying over and over. And now, they've presented their masterpiece to the world. Calling them liars is like calling them talentless hacks. They spent a lot of time crafting their fiction. The villain is a character in that story, and it belongs to the accuser. He's not a real person. You don't get to tell her that her story has holes or that it doesn't mesh with the truth. And thus, a person's identity is stolen overnight, or in just a few hours with creative nonfiction. Much of the crappy dialogue can be found online. In fact, in one case I helped with, 18 phrases that the young woman claimed were said by the villain in her tale were actually phrases taken from a single website. These so-called survivor support sites have become a sort of Plots Unlimited resource for false accusers. It's kind of the choose-your-own-adventure of campfire stories, where you get a Girl Guide badge if you tell a story well enough to get some bloke arrested. And it's her story. You have no right to take it away from her. You see, your life, your identity, the very reality of your existence, it doesn't belong to you if you're a man. You're just fodder for a woman's creative writing project. And if you don't like her story, you're a big meanie who doesn't support women's literature. This new genre of storytelling spares women the onerous task of coming up with good character names. They can just pick a real guy's name and go from there. Preferably, it's someone they actually had sex with, but that's a detail that we can work out later if necessary. Just try to pick someone that you were alone with for at least 5 minutes. And who would be better storytellers than members of CanLit, the Canadian literature community? The oppressed women of CanLit, by which I mean bitter, envious canker blossoms, have launched an attack on other writers who take up too much space, calling themselves the CanLit janitors. They've got a list of 24 men, last time I checked, whose lives they want to destroy to make more space for themselves. These so-called janitors aren't taking out the trash. They're throwing out the furniture and roasting marshmallows by the dumpster fire while they regale each other with sad tales of ableism. And again, the names of the men whose lives are being rewritten in this sacrifice to the gods of pulp fiction are lost in the gears of the outrage machine. Few people remember who Steven Galloway is anymore, and we're not meant to care. Galloway is no longer a real man who was cleared of all allegations by an inquiry. He's no longer the celebrated author who took on too many thesis students while trying to build the prestige of UBC's creative writing department. No, Galloway became a character in someone else's dime store novel over 2 years ago. The authority on who Galloway is, well, that's not himself, nor his friends or family or any actual witnesses to his life. The authority are the accusers who chose him to enact their own story of his life. And this is where you, the audience, comes in. You see, according to the Canadian literature janitors, the public isn't a good judge of which writers have talent. Margaret Atwood, for example, the iconic feminist writer, well, she's off the reading list because she's a privileged old white woman who doesn't approve of the new feminism. She takes up too much space on the bookshelf, which is preventing other, more oppressed authors from being heard. Atwood's hard work and talent, even though I'm not a big fan of her work, I don't deny the talent behind it. Well, that's not something the public are able to determine for themselves. You don't get to buy the novels you want. You need the janitors to clean up your library for you. The public isn't a good judge of which writers have talent. You can't tell a good story from a bad one. You're too complicit in the patriarchy to spend your money wisely, and you're not smart enough to determine who's telling the truth because you ask too many damned questions. Any of you who want to know if you're reading nonfiction or not, well, you're part of the problem. This is pulp fiction, people. Of course the story has holes in it. That's what makes it so believable and grand. It's postmodern nonfiction. It's post-truth, true crime. You don't need to know who Steven Galloway is or if he's guilty. He's a character in Chelsea Rooney's smut novel. He's a plot device in Sierra Sky Gemma's Reckoning Day essay. He's just collateral damage in the pursuit of a brave new form of storytelling. You are the judge and jury, but you're not allowed to demand facts. If you don't agree, well, you just don't appreciate art. Your job is to applaud. Your job is to believe. Your job is to reach the conclusions that you're told to reach, because you are just a character in the plot of a badly written novel.